Hello and welcome to FP Live. I'm Ravi Agrawal, Foreign Policy's Editor-in-Chief. In exactly 1 week now, Donald Trump will assume the presidency of the United States. One of the first things he will do, he has said, is to focus on what he calls the largest deportation operation in American history. Part of the reason is that Trump believes he has a mandate to make dramatic changes on immigration. He has called undocumented immigrants savage gangs who are, quote, poisoning the blood of the country. According to the Department of Homeland Security, there are about 11 million unauthorized immigrants in the United States. Trump has claimed the number is as high as 21 million. But whatever the correct number, there is little doubt that a mass deportation will have immense social and economic impacts, not just on the United States, but also the countries that would have to take back these immigrants. In a moment, we will speak to an expert who will explain what Trump might actually do, who are the officials who might enact his policies, and the ramifications of those policies. As always, we will take some subscriber questions during this conversation. If you are not a member yet, join us. You can use the code FPLive for a discount. You can also listen to these discussions for free on our podcast, FP Live. I urge you to follow us there. So, what should we expect from Donald Trump's immigration policy starting next week? Joining me now is someone who has studied immigration and borders extensively. Edward Alden is a columnist for foreign policy and the author of several books on trade and immigration, including most recently, When the World Closed Its Doors, the COVID-19 Tragedy and the Future of Borders, a book he co-authored with Laurie Troutman. Ted, welcome to FP Live.
Great to be with you, Ravi. Thank you.
So let's just start with this. What have Trump and his team actually said they will do on immigration?
They have promised what they call, and you said it correctly in the introduction, the largest mass deportation in American history. They promised to expand detention facilities dramatically, to go beyond the usual targets of deportation and reach into neighborhoods and companies and others. They've roughly targeted 1 million deportations a year, which is more than twice as many as any president has done over the last couple of decades. So rhetorically, at least, they are promising something very big.
And the Biden administration just extended temporary humanitarian protections for, I think, about 1 million immigrants from places like Venezuela, Ukraine, and Sudan for about 18 months. And on that note, I thought I should take a subscriber question right away. This one's from Sylvia Elguea. If these deportations are implemented, how large of a humanitarian crisis will Trump's stated policies create, Ted?
I mean, it could be quite dramatic. I mean, you mentioned temporary protected status. If the courts behave the way they have in the past, these people will be protected in the United States through the expiration, but that's 18 months in most cases. So you're still in the middle of Trump's second term. The most vulnerable people at the moment were the nearly 1 million people brought in from Cuba, from Haiti, from Nicaragua, and from Venezuela under what's known as parole. This was a major initiative over the last couple of years of the Biden administration. They're actually Ukrainians and Afghans who are in the United States under a similar status. The US government knows where these people are. That status was essentially granted through executive authority by President Biden, could be eliminated by executive authority under President Trump. So that's a really vulnerable set of individuals. And your viewers may have noticed, common in all those countries is a fair degree of internal chaos, economies facing enormous challenges. So if you're sending those numbers of people back home, that's going to be disruptive in those places. Raises the question, of course, of whether they'll even be accepted. Venezuela and Cuba in particular have a long history of not cooperating with U.S. deportation policies. So there could be significant unrest in the region if the Trump team goes about this the way they're threatening.
Here's another subscriber question that there's so much uncertainty about what could happen. So I feel like we need to get through a lot of basic questions
Sure.
first. This one's from Lindsay Badenoch, and she points out that more than 40% of America's agricultural workers are undocumented migrants. So what happens to farming?
Well, I mean, it's going to have dramatic effects on farming, particularly in California. There are, and this is a gross overgeneralization that I hope all the farming families won't yell at me over, but there's sort of heavily mechanized agriculture in the United States, corn, wheat, soybeans, a lot of that's in the middle parts of the country. And then there are more labor intensive crops, strawberries and oranges and apples and things that need human pickers, a lot of that concentrated on the West Coast in California, to some extent in Florida. That's where the undocumented workforce is vital. The viewers right, about 40% of the agricultural workforce in California is thought to be undocumented. If you see those people removed in large scale, you're going to have serious labor shortages. There have been efforts by farmers in the past to recruit Americans to do these jobs, even at some significant increase in wages. This has not been successful. So it could cause a real crisis for that part of the economy. Longer run, the farmers will figure out ways to adjust. There are ways to mechanize some of these things. Presumably, we would import a higher percentage of our fresh produce if it becomes too expensive to produce here in the United States. But that has other ramifications. Here in the United States, we have certain laws in terms of pesticides and herbicides and things that are not always necessarily followed by other countries. So yeah, this is, if we look at the sectors where we're going to see the most significant impacts, agriculture is probably number one. Construction is a very close second. And, we're now going to have to talk about the rebuilding of Los Angeles in the wake of these horrific fires, which sadly are not finished yet. If you look at Houston some years back and the hurricane devastation, it was an undocumented workforce that largely did that rebuilding. And then the third will be hospitality industries of all sorts. So they stand to be hit quite hard, again, if the scale of this is anything like the Trump team is talking about.
And beyond specific sectors, if you zoom out a little bit, what is the cost? What are the economic impacts that such a move would have? Again, assuming that the Trump team does what it says it's going to do, which is, ostensibly to deport, upwards of 1 million people.
I mean, just the sheer cost for the government, we're talking about, billions and billions of additional dollars. We're spending 50 billion plus on immigration enforcement here. That's going to have to go way up. You're going to need expanded detention facilities. The limit right now is about 40,000 at any given time. And people facing deportation have a right to petition their cases to our immigration courts, which are an arm of the Department of Justice. Those courts are hopelessly backlogged. So you're going to need to see expansion of judges. You're going to need to see an expansion of detention space. You may need to see many more ICE agents. There's talk about deploying National Guard to assist these efforts. That has enormous costs. So just the sheer logistical costs of this are very large. And then, as we've discussed a little bit, it has significant consequences for the industries that employ these people. There are other issues here which are sort of one order removed, but we can talk, for instance, about what the Congress is working on right now with the Lake and Riley Act. But there are potential implications here as well for legal immigration. We saw in the first Trump administration substantial reductions in legal immigration. There's a real internal fight in Trump world right now between those like Elon Musk, who very much like the H-1B program that brings in skilled migrants, and those like Steve Bannon on the other side who would like to shut it down. So there are issues in the water here that are likely to affect technology companies in California, universities, hospitals, other places where these highly skilled immigrants are employed. So I don't think we should imagine that we're just talking about the sectors that hire unauthorized workers. The implications of this are potentially much broader.
And there are studies by the Peterson Institute and others that point to real loss of GDP, if obviously depending on the numbers, but a significant hit to American GDP.
They've suggested 2% plus if the full scale of this is carried out. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I guess it's worth then asking, like, what kind of market signals might deter Trump and his team from going through with everything they've said they will do?
I mean, this is the real question, and it's not just immigration. I do a lot of writing on trade as well, and most of your viewers will know that Trump is threatening very large tariffs on day one, and I think to a considerable extent the markets are really the only constraint on this. Congress is urging the president on the immigration front. The courts have proven pretty lenient. I suspect some of these initiatives will face obstacles in the lower courts, but the higher courts in the country today are pretty Trump friendly. Most of the circuits, not all of them, Supreme Court clearly. So I think the courts will be at most a bump in the road. I think the major limitation on the incoming president here is how markets react. And there's a tension here because there are reasons, and they've certainly hinted at this, that the Trump team wants to go big and go hard. They want to send a very strong message from day one that it's a new sheriff in town, and anybody who's here in an undocumented capacity should be scared. The hope is that you generate what's sometimes called self-deportation, that people are scared. They think, okay, ICE is coming after me, and rather than waiting, I'll try to make arrangements to go back to the country that I came from. And so there's some incentive for the Trump team to go really hard at the beginning. But if they do that on immigration, some of the same incentives on trade to go out of the box very hard, the possibility for a strong negative market reaction is there. And that, I think, will clearly trouble the administration. Donald Trump pays pretty close attention to what the markets do. And, I don't have a crystal ball on the markets. If I did, I'd be a lot richer. But I think there's every reason to believe that the impacts, certainly of going hard on trade and immigration from day one, are likely to be strongly negative. I think that's some of what's going on in the markets over the last week or two. You saw the real Trump bump right after the election. And now I think there's some sober second thoughts, particularly about the inflationary implications of these actions. Both, removal of migrants and tariffs are inflationary, and at a time where inflation is at best kind of loosely under control, certainly possibility of it surging back in the face of these initiatives.